أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
What's that? Like a drag these box here, so it's crowded. So it looks fine. Plugged in? Yeah, I think it's better if it stays plugged in so it doesn't go off on us. Restart. You want to take this one? Doesn't matter. It's closer to you. So, yeah, so you take that. Yeah. Oh, they don't use it. They don't. The idea is that we're just here hiding that you're done now. That's pretty cool. Come living in that apartment, right? Says copy. No problem, no.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Alhamdulillah, we have the Khalil Center. They were able to, join us today. I've let Sheikh Human discuss more about the Khalil Center and what they do, but I've seen them in person, a lot of the programs that they put on, and mashallah, they do a very good job, and they're doing a very good service for the Muslim community. Just a brief bio about Sheikh Human. He's a licensed clinical professional counselor. He holds a master's in clinical psychology and a bachelor's of science. He's currently an adjunct professor of psychology at a number of institutions. He is also the founder and director of Khalil Center, a community spiritual and mental wellness center and he's authored a number of academic papers. Also, he's studying Islamic, studying through his, the Islamic studies at a number of institutions in the Chicago area and across the country, I believe, with different sheikhs. And we also have Sheikh Jabir from the Bay Area. He's also a Master's of Arts candidate in marriage and family therapy. And he's also studying Islamic theology at Dar al-Uloom in Fremont. So alhamdulillah, we're honored to have these guests who not only know the Islamic aspects of what they are studying, and also they are educated in psychology. They are educated therapists, so they'll be able to again, Sheikh Uman will explain what the Khalil Center does, that they're able to meld both of the aspects of Islamic and psychological nature. So.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're very happy to be here, mashallah, in this Mubarak crowd, in this Mubarak place, mashallah. So just in brief, I think Brother Usman was talking about Khalil Center. What is Khalil Center? Myself and Jabir are both staff members at Khalil Center. Khalil Center is a psychological and spiritual wellness center. It's basically taking our Islamic values and principles and applying it and utilizing and integrating modern behavioral science and the science of psychology in order to help the Muslim community. And one of the things that we do is not only in helping people across counseling and therapy, like marital counseling and individual counseling, whether it's depression, anxiety, but also what we do is a lot of seminars, and that's part of our education, awareness, and wellness. So to promote kind of wellness within our community, we do these sorts of seminars as well. And alhamdulillah, this is one of them. And Jabir, mashallah, he is out in the Bay Area, and he is also a student of knowledge, mashallah, and he is also an interning therapist over there. And so one of the unique things about Khalil Center is that its niche is that we are grounded in the Islamic tradition, where many of us have studied the Islamic tradition, but we are also trained professionals in the field of psychology, clinical psychology, or social work, or therapy, or marriage and family counseling. And so what we do is, in order to address not only issues, but to reinforce or to develop some of our own values, we not only draw from the Islamic tradition, but we also take from behavioral science. And this was the tradition of our scholars of the past. الحكمة ضالة المؤمن فحيثما تجدها فهو أحق بها. That wisdom is the lost commodity of the believer, and wheresoever he finds it, he is most deserving of it. He has the most haqq on it. Why? Because al-khalqu kulluhum ayal Allah. That all of the humanity, the creation, is the dependence on Allah. This the world is the kawn is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the knowledge of it is also most deserving and exalting of Allah ta'ala. But that this knowledge, they are most entitled to that knowledge over the kuffar, those that recognize His greatness and testify to the oneness of Allah and His existence and being, and the risala of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So today what we wanted to do is, in anticipation of Ramadan just being a couple of days away in front of us, a lot of individuals want to use Ramadan as an opportunity for change, right? And this is our opportunity once a year, not only to get a spiritual recharge, but to actually induce some change in us. وَأَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. And the best action is that's done perpetually. So yes, in the month of Ramadan, we will increase our ibadat, and we should, especially Laylatul Qadr in the last 10 days, we should. And however, in addition to that, we have to carry over something into our regular lives, into our habits and daily activities. That is the goal. That is part of the goal of Ramadan, is to actually induce change. And in Ramadan, we have a lot of motivation. And one of the things that happens is that shaitan is locked up. So then what happens? We are confronting our own nufus, our own selves, our nafs, during the month of Ramadan. This is an opportune time to do a muhasaba, assessment of oneself. This is an opportune time to examine oneself and their tendencies, habits. And this is also an opportune time that what you do after an assessment, when you take the car to the body shop, you hear some noise coming from it. What do? After you know where the noise is coming from, you need to actually do the work on it, right? You don't just take the car to the body shop and you just hear it making noise and then you leave. When you go to the doctor, you get all these diagnostic tests, right? Blood test and urine tests and whatnot, and they say this is what you have, this. What's next? You have to do some amal, some action needs to be done, some intervention. Ramadan is an opportunity for us to do our own muhasabah, our own assessment into our own selves. Once we do an assessment in our own selves, it is the perfect time to create and do an intervention. Why? Because that is the time when we have the most motivation. Right? What in the psychology of human behavior, they say that what drives human behavior is motivation. Right? Is this energy and excitement, raghbah or josh, you get this energy and excitement to do something. But it's not very useful if it just disappears, right? I mean, we see this all the time. Somebody, a new Muslim becomes Muslim. Day one, he is wearing an amama, miswak in the mouth, leather socks, thobe, lungi underneath, you name it. Tahajjud, qira'atul Quran, the whole 9 yards. MashaAllah, it's excellent. And of course, they have a lot of motivation during that time, right? But it's not sustainable. That sudden change in the human being is not sustainable. In Ramadan, we have the opportunity to have lots of a'mal, kathratul a'mal, kathratul adhkar, a lot of a'mal. But the mudawama, the continuity of doing that, is difficult to sustain year-round. Is it easy to fast the whole year or do Sawm Dawood, to fast every other day when you haven't been fasting? To wake up for tahajjud every day, qiyam, finish several Quran throughout every day? No, inshallah we aspire there, but it's not something that just happens tomorrow. So part of what I would like to think about is the how. The how, right? We want to make these small incremental changes, mudawama, and have continuity, istiqama, continuity and firmness in what we establish. And that is the goal of today, is to be able to help facilitate that. And to utilize not only our own tradition, but also looking at behavioral change principles, the nature of the human being, to be able to make good informed choices about how we're going to make that change. And this is the best time to exercise that, is when we have the most motivation, is to capitalize on that. So that's the goal of today. We'll jump into our slideshows. Now, I'm having these slideshows. This is for you to be able to take notes if you like to. This is a workshop. A workshop, I was telling Jabir, like before, I said, hey, this is not a bayan, it's a workshop. Okay? What does a workshop mean? How does it differ from a bayan? It's primarily designed to be educational and secondarily designed to be motivational. Okay? Because Ramadan is coming and the motivation is there, and I'm not a motivational speaker. I can give you some good education, inshallah. And then you'll get the motivation throughout month of Ramadan to implement this education. It's an opportunity for you. You can take some notes if you like. And if you have any questions, just jump right in. Raise your hand. We can have a discussion about it. Don't be shy. Okay? And we'll do a formal Q&A after Maghrib. That's the goal, inshallah. Allah gives us barakah in our time. We'll see how we're going along, inshallah. But this is the goal. And I want you can, have some of the slides on there, but don't let it be too distracting. Look at it, but also make sure you're paying attention to my explanation and Jabir's explanation. So, just starting with the idea of change. What's change all about? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, and Jabir is going to talk about this a little bit more, a nafs. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Allah gave a nafs. It has a capacity for evil, it has a capacity for good. And there's a saying in the Arabic language, يُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاءُ بِأَضْدَادِهَا, that things are known by their opposites. Okay, so what is it that the nafs, if we want to induce good behavior, let's understand what the nafs inclines towards that actually takes us away from reaching our goals. What is the tendency of the nafs that actually takes us away from our goals? Well, there's two primary things. One is pleasure-seeking behavior, hedonism. Right? It inclines towards pleasure. Right? And secondly, the avoidance of discomfort. We want to avoid that which is uncomfortable and pleasure seek. So, we would like to go to a talk that's entertaining, that satisfies our nafs, right? And that it shouldn't be too long, and it should contain enough entertainment that it's not too uncomfortable, right? So pleasure seeking pleasure, and avoidance of discomfort. These are the two evils. These are two evils of the nafs. And this whole society is designed to fuel your shahawat of your nafs, the pleasures of your nafs. So what do? They give you a credit card. Now you can spend. The problem is that when you pleasure seek and avoid discomfort, you actually decrease the likelihood of pleasure in the long term and increase discomfort in the long term. So it's short-lived. The Prophet ﷺ drew two lines. He drew one line that was a long line. And then he drew one shorter line. The shorter line, he said to the Sahaba, this is the hayat of the human being. This is the lifespan of the human being. And what is and then the longer line, he said, is the desires, the ambitions, tulul amal, right? The ambitions, aspirations of the nafs. So it actually exceeds the human lifespan, right? And so we get these credit cards, but what happens? You're going to get the bill later on, aren't you? And then it's going to be much more heavier on you than the actual spending that you did in the first place. It was easy to buy, but hard to pay off. What do you have? You have the whole pornography addiction industry. Instant pleasure, and what do? We wire you up to these things. So it's so easy with the click of a button. You don't have to do much energy to go get this. Instant gratification. But you know what? To actually have a relationship
and to work on your relationship with your spouse and to have satisfactory relations with her, that's difficult. But actually it's more pleasurable. It's actually more pleasurable. And it has adverse consequences when you do these things, all of the negative consequences when you can't enjoy, intimacy. You can't enjoy regular pleasures. Actually, I talk about this, the brain and its addiction to pleasure. The brain, the circuitry in the brain, the reward system circuitry in your brain, when you become addicted to something, and by addicted we're not only talking about drugs, behavioral addictions, pleasure-seeking behaviors, a tendency of the human being. It mimics the same circuitry as drugs do. It plays on the same reward circuitry, and this is not a neuropsychology class, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. But the basic idea is that it mimics the same reward circuitry. And what happens? You actually get craving responses, right? And you get withdrawals. You get accustomed to pleasure seeking, and the more you do it, the more pleasure that you need. And the less resilient you are for discomfort. Right? The more difficulty you have with discomfort. All of these things, what do we use? We have dishwashers, computers, phones. All of this is designed to do what? Decrease discomfort, increase convenience, so we don't have to spend all the time. But what is it? How many of us have time? The number one complaint in this country is that we don't have time. Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ, they say, that your friend has a haqq over you, that your neighbor has a haqq over you. These are people ask these questions in America. They say, man, how do you take care of the neighbor? I don't even have time for my own children, let alone inquiring about the neighbor, let alone calling my friend or checking in on extended family, all of these things. But we have all of these ways to decrease discomfort, but actually less comfort overall. And what do we have? Jabir will also talk about this, inshallah. Jabir, why don't you go ahead, inshallah, talk about it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Nabi al-Kareem. Mashallah, Brother Human did a fantastic job introducing this topic for all of us to sort of look into this avoidance of comfort, right? A pleasure seeking and avoidance of discomfort. So there are some points here, some examples of that, okay? For example, obesity. So a person gets he knows that if I continue having a bad lifestyle of eating, bad foods, eating a lot of cholesterol, eating a lot of sugar, what happens is that eventually that's going to lead to diabetes, or it's going to lead to obesity. And then that's going to be a very, bad lifestyle to continue to have or to continue to live. So initially what happens? Your doctor tells you, you have to cut this out of your diet, you have to cut sugars out of your diet, you have to cut cholesterol out of your diet. So he tells you this and you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut this out of my diet. Then the next morning, you're getting ready for breakfast, and you see all the paratha, you see all the chai with the sugar and all the good food, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, my doctor told me I shouldn't be eating this because then it's going to lead to a bad lifestyle, it's going to lead to obesity, etc. So then you stop. But then your stomach starts to hurt because having milk with like a little bit of honey and bread doesn't feel so good. You missed all the good food. So now that pain that you feel, that discomfort that you feel, that I want to go back to this. What do? You avoid that pain. So you go back to the food and you start eating it again. So the avoidance of discomfort in the beginning, that small amount of discomfort that your stomach was hurting, now led you to what? Now you are obese. Now you have diabetes. The other example, lethargy. I don't feel good today, therefore I'm not going to do any work. I'm going to take it easy today. I know I have this exam I need to do, or I have this test I need to, study for. But you know what? I've studied so much already. So what I'll do is, I'm not going to study today. I'm going to take it easy today. The problem is that you will feel worse that you didn't do anything, and then you'll say that, this sucks out further energy from you. And the saying goes, lethargy begets lethargy. The example is, I'll clarify a little bit more. You worked all week. 6 days a week you work, or 7 days a week you work, or 5 days a week, whatever it is. But on Saturday, or Friday night, you have an assignment you need to complete. So you say, you know what, it's Friday night, it's fine, I'll do it tomorrow. Now you could have taken a little bit of, discomfort of working Friday night also and completed your work. But instead, what do? You put that off. Then comes Saturday, then comes Sunday, you missed your deadline, and you didn't do it. Then you feel terrible, I wasted the whole weekend, I could have completed this, but I didn't. Right? And then the other example is anxiety. Rather than overcoming anxiety-provoking situations, we avoid them. For example, not public speaking constricts the sort of work and the jobs that we do. Because we are what? We are afraid of, or we decide not to take the discomfort in the beginning of, for example, coming and speaking in front of an audience, a crowd, or a job, applying for a job. Because we're nervous or we're scared or we don't want to take that extra step, that little bit of discomfort, we don't go through it. So then what happens at the end of the day? You have more anxiety. You're more nervous. You're more afraid of doing that thing that you wanted to do. So this graph is actually quite interesting. Okay? So you see the blue line are the people who procrastinate. They delay their work. And the red line is the people who do not delay their work. They do it right when they need to. So this is for people who are taking, for example, in a class. And this is a graph. So what I'll do is I'll explain kind of what it shows, and then I'll explain it after. So the blue line shows that in the beginning of a class, it's the beginning of the year, for example, you don't worry so much about it. You take a sort of backseat approach. You're like, oh, it's a long class. I'm not going to worry about it right now. It's fine. So what happens? Your anxiety levels, right, is much less. As the blue line, right, you see it? It's much less than or not much less, but it's less than the people who start worrying about the class from day one. You see, there's different types of people. Some people, they're ready from day one. They have their notebook, they have their textbook, they're ready to start studying for that class. They have the fiqh is there, they're concerned about it. So their anxiety, their fiqh is a little bit more from the beginning. And then the people who are, oh, it's okay, it's a long class. When the time comes, I'll study for it. But in the long run, what happens? The people who procrastinated, the people who delayed getting started on their work or getting started, studying for their test or for their paper or for their exam, at the end of the semester, they have much higher anxiety levels, which is quite significant, than people who did what? Than people who started from the beginning, concerned and focused. They did much worse, meaning they had much more higher levels of anxiety.
Yeah, so if you're looking here, right, the sum total at the end, how much anxiety, who has more stress? So a person is delaying a project, an assignment, you have less stress, right? You're taking it easy, you're sleeping. Versus the person who actually started an assignment. Then who in the end has less stress? The person who started early or the person who started late? The person who started early. In the beginning, it requires you to get over your nafs, to conquer your nafs in the beginning, right? My sister used to do this actually. My sister, I'm a person that takes, if I get an assignment, I take 2 weeks to do the assignment. Each day, I do about 15 minutes. And obviously, that's uncomfortable compared to 0, right? If I'm just sitting down and eating nachos are not halal, I guess he told me today on this trip, but whatever, a halal brand of chips, okay? Nachos like Malaysian version. And I'm eating that, I'm hanging out, taking it easy, chilling, right? So my sister used to do this. Whenever she would get an assignment, she would be sitting, reading a book, talking to her friends, doing all sorts of things. And I would say to her, don't you have an assignment to do? It's a pretty big project. And she'd say, don't remind me right now. I don't want to hear it. Right? I'm trying to enjoy myself. And she'd get so irritated. Like, okay, just consider that you have an assignment coming up. Okay. The day before the exam, or the assignment, she would literally stay up the whole night. And before she stayed up, she would literally cry. She would literally cry, oh my God, I have so much, how am I going to stay up? I'm going to fail, I'm going to do this. And the whole night, and then like after an hour of crying, she stays up the whole night. And like she's falling asleep in class the next day. So the idea is the sum total of anxiety that you experience. At the end, the little bit of pain that you experience in order to control your nafs during Ramadan, to form and shrink your stomach. At the end of the month, what happens? Goes away, right? It's easy to fast the next time. But what we do is we screw it up, obviously, right? We screw it up. The little bit of pain that you need to take. This is a principle that, they say this, right? No pain, no what? No gain. That's true, right? In muscle tissue, when you're going to the gym, right? I used to work in a gym before. When you go to the gym and those big buff guys, how do you think they got like that? They're really pushing themselves. You have to tear the tissues in your, tear your muscle tissues. That's painful. But then what happens? It replenishes itself and it gets stronger. So the idea is that you have to endure a little bit of this pain. And this dunya is what? Darul imtihan, Darul bala. You know bala? I mean, it exists in like all of our languages, I imagine. It's just been transferred over. Urdu, Farsi. Is it in Punjabi? I don't know, probably, right? It's in, yeah? Yeah, bala, in Pashto, you name it. Turkish, bala. You know, my parents used to say I'm like a bala to them, you know. Oh my God. But it just transfers over, right? Because it's a universal concept, right? أحسب الناس ويتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد ولنبلونكم حتى نعلم المجاهدين منكم والصابرين. Right? So we will test you so that we can see the mujahideen amongst you. We're not talking about going to Afghanistan, okay? And that could be the case too, but not right now in this context. We're recording, we're in a public setting. Was-sabirin, the people who have patience. Mujahada is a principle of this deen. My teacher, Sheikh Amin in Chicago, Osman Bhai knows him, right? He's met him. He used to say that our civilizational code as Muslims is mujahada. It's sacrifice. Sacrifice and striving, right? وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those people who strive in our way, what happens? You get, ease comes after. إِنَّمَا الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. After or alongside struggle. Without mujahada, there will be no najat. There will be no success in anything. This is a human concept, whether it's in the world, في الدنيا والآخرة. And we find this, right? Jabir, you want to talk about all the suffering we're going through in the world?
Well, before I do that, there's this, just to complement what Uman was saying, one of the mashayikh, they mentioned this statement on the topic of mujahada. That I could be wrong on the wording of this, but it says, "Man lam yahriq fil bidaya, lam yashriq fil nihaya." That anyone who doesn't suffer in the beginning will not shine in the end.
It's Ibn Ata'Allah.
Ibn Ata'Allah Skandari. You have to have a little bit of challenges. You go through a little bit of difficulty in the beginning in order to shine in the end. Many people, they go through, a lot of times people complain about, I don't want to go through the madrasa, or I don't want to go through college, I don't want to go through what? Because, what's the point? I don't want to go through that, or it's going to take too long, right? The system's going to take too long. In California, right, there's a very sad fact. In California, a lot of parents, I myself come from an Afghani background, okay? My parents, mother and father. There, the rate of hufaz or ulama or people who are in the deen is much less than our brothers and sisters from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh.
And the reasoning is, and this is unfortunate, but this is across the board, is that when you ask the parents, why didn't you put your kids in the hifz of Quran in a young age? Why didn't you put them in a madrasa in an early age, so that by the time they're in high school, they'll be complete, then they can complete the rest of their education? They didn't think of it like this. They said it would take too long. It's too much work. I don't have time for it. Whereas in reality, if you would have made the sacrifice in the early stages, when they were younger, when it was more manageable, now when they're older, it's going to be a lot more difficult to manage. Right? So are we really happier with so much access to pleasure? Right? Look at what this access has done. From 1960 to the year 2000, we have all of these statistics now. Double divorce rates, triple teen suicide rates, because this access to pleasure, to instant gratification. 6 times increase in babies born to unmarried parents, right? Because you go and you do the amal, you go and you do the deed. In our deen, subhanAllah, how beautiful the deen is, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought in the sharia, the nikah, because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that the nikah was made easy, so that zina would be difficult. But when we flip this, like Maulana Hashim Hafidahullah mentions, Maulana Hashim, Maulana Ibrahim's father, Damat Barakatuhum, what does he say? He says we need to have a paradigm inversion. We need to flip upside down the way we see things, the way we do things, the way we see the world, the way we perceive things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made nikah easy so that zina would be difficult. But what did society do? Because of this access to pleasure, society has made nikah difficult and made zina easy. To have a nikah in our culture, how difficult is that? We place all these burdens on the youngsters that, $50,000 nikah you need, $100,000 mahar you need. It makes it difficult, right? So now we look into, happiness and the 2 types of happiness. So there's pleasure, which is short term, which is about doing something for yourself, right? At the avoidance of discomfort. And then you have satisfaction, which is long term, and that is about being selfless and embracing discomfort. And what that means is that you can enjoy, you can have your pleasure short-lived, immediate, and you can possibly live with a lifetime of regret. Versus you can live a satisfied life by doing what? Being selfless, embracing the discomfort in the beginning, going through a little bit of mujahada, right? And spending the rest of your life in happiness. And one of my teachers, he mentioned this very beautiful example. And I was sharing this with the brothers on the way here in the past few days that we've been sort of on the East Coast, was that it is so easy. It is so easy for a person to be very bad and to have bad akhlaq. And it is so difficult for a person to be very good. Why? Because it's very easy, it's instant, right? It's right away. It's that instant sort of immediate thing that someone says something to you, instantly you want to get mad. You're stuck in traffic for 1 hour, immediately you want to go and start yelling at everybody. You want to be angry at everyone. Whereas it's very difficult, but if you accept the discomfort of being in traffic, you will be thankful that you did not react in a negative way. All these road rage, right? All of these things, where does it come from? You cannot have that sabr in the beginning, so you react first. You react first. And the mashayikh, what do they mention about sabr? As-sabru inda sadmatil ula. That sabr is in the first sort of, the moment you hear the shocking news. When you hear something, what is our reaction? Immediately, we go and smash the wall, or punch the wall, or scream and fight. And then afterwards, we sit in our room quietly and say, I'm having sabr. After you broke the vase and slammed the table and threw the shoe across the room, you cannot sit quietly and then say, I'm having sabr. Sabr is in the first shock. The first moment you hear something.
So, the kind of related to the point that he was making earlier, there's some data to show what's interesting is about the human being is that pleasure-seeking behavior, right? There's a difference between satisfaction and pleasure. Pleasure is short-lived and is short-term, and it's for yourself, right? To satisfy something for yourself. What they say today, I'm going to spoil myself today. I'm going to take care of myself, right? So I'm going to do something for myself. What's interesting is that that is short-lived. But actually being selfless and doing something for someone else increases the likelihood, increases pleasure, increases satisfaction. It's actually much more longer lived. And actually I want to jump into some of let's jump right into the strategies, because we want to make sure that this is where really all the meat and potatoes are. This is where the gosh is in the salan, right? This is where it is. So the nafs is like a horse, right? The Imam al-Ghazali gives this analogy of the horse, that if you train it, then it will be of service to you. But if it's not trained, then it's going to run wild. You're always going to be seeking pleasure and trying to avoid discomfort. This is the nature of the nafs. So what does it require? It needs refinement. فَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. And the principle is مُخَالَفَةُ النَّفْس, is to actually go against your nafs. Training is a lifelong process of going against that which is uncomfortable. Here is something, so everybody, what they experience is different. So for me, eating, I don't know, maybe cheesecake. I don't like cheesecake. That's easy for me to avoid, isn't it? But eating gulab jamun, maybe that's my evil. That's my go-to. Everybody's discomfort is going to be different. So what's the best way to gauge whether you're growing or not? Is if you feel pain. That you should always be in such a situation where you are inflicting some pain on yourself. I'm not saying every day, excessive, but you're always inflicting some pain on yourself. So reading one page of Quran a day is difficult. That's painful. So you do that until it doesn't become painful anymore. Then add another page. Because then you have done what? You have increased the muscle of what we call in psychology impulse control. Impulse control is like a muscle. Your nafs is like a muscle. And you develop resiliency. If you don't believe me, think about all of the, uncle, I'm going to put you on the spot, if it's okay. Were you born in this country? No, where were you born, if you don't mind me asking? In Pakistan, okay. Do you have any children? No children. Any nieces or nephews? Okay. And are they born or raised? Do you have any that are born and raised here? Few of them. What about here? Were they born and raised here? Anybody? Any family members of yours? Yes? Okay. Have you ever noticed that somebody who's born and raised here, if they go back to Pakistan, the things that you will find to be easy to tolerate will be difficult for them, wasn't it? Very difficult. Like temperature maybe, right? Maybe water, maybe the cleanliness of the air, right? Maybe not having a nice comfortable convertible or like a brand new vehicle, maybe having automatic transmission, right? Or these kinds of things are challenging for them, isn't it? So why? Because, mashallah, your training by being in circumstances of not having has developed a resiliency, has grown the muscle. Right? If you do some work, right? And then, but somebody who's always sitting around and they say, oh, it's okay, beta, just study all the time, but you never do any chores. Then they get married. And then they're like, oh my God, making eggs is so difficult. It's so difficult. I have to do this. You have to clean the house. Why? There's no training. The muscle builds. So what has to happen? You have to experience pain. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that for children to build resiliency in children, you should give them one day good food, the next day give them dry bread. That way they develop, so when they don't have the good food, they can eat the dry bread and they can survive. You know? And actually I deal with this a lot. I see a lot of my clients, people, especially suburban kids, mashallah, Long Island seems to be a wonderful place to live and it's very green and comfortable. You know, maybe some of our brothers in Queens or Brooklyn or whatever have a little bit more resiliency than we do. So what happens is that some of our brothers are so accustomed, and sisters, so accustomed to comfort. So I told one of my clients, I said, you should go on Jamaat. Not that my whole agenda of therapy is to put people in Jamaat. That's not my style of therapy, you know. I have somebody standing in the back, tashkeeling, you know. The administration, when we're done, I'll take your payment. By the way, how many days? Wait, no. But I told him, go on Jamaat. Why? I said, why should you go on Jamaat? Because it'll build your resiliency. Said, go with a Jamaat that you have no idea where they're going to go. I mean, in the country. He's like, well, what if I end up in like Afghanistan or something? No, like in this country somewhere, right? Go with a Jamaat. And go with people you don't like. Like people you're going to socialize with. Do this once a month. Why? Because they're going to go to random places, take a backpack, sleep on the floor, you don't know where you're going. There's a brother, I'm teaching a class in Hartford actually. That's part of the reason why I'm here. And in between the weekend, we're visiting the East Coast. There's an imam. He came, African Americans have great resiliency, mashallah. He lives in Las Vegas. And he is like, and so he got sponsorship to come over here for, and you know, imams, mashallah, they're, you know how much we're paid, right? Imams are like kings. Our masajid, we give them BMWs and Mercedes, and we give them healthcare insurance, and you know, all of these things, right? No, unfortunately not. We don't do this, right? Our imams, mashallah, we don't take care of our imams. So he's in Las Vegas, and he says, look, this is a course I want to go to. So he gets the masjid to sponsor the course. He comes out to take my class for 2 weeks. He comes out, he has no idea where he's going to stay. He doesn't have money for the hotel or anything. Hotels, no accommodations. He said, you know what, I'm going for the sake of Allah. Tawakkal ala Allah, I'm going to come here and I'm learning this class. I have the accommodations to cover the flight. I mean, I couldn't do that, right? Because you have to have a certain level of ability to tolerate discomfort and to deal with the unpredictability of the lack of control, which is actually what comfort is all about, is control and having everything designed to be your way. That's what anxiety is actually. Anxiety is about not having control. What's going to happen tomorrow? Am I going to pay the bills tomorrow? What's going to happen with my job? What's going to happen with the politics? What's going to happen with this and that? But let's get, so some basic strategies. One of them was resiliency I mentioned. I talked about doing an assessment of yourself. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the self-assessment, Jabir?
So as Brother Umar was mentioning, having that motivation, going through a little bit of difficulty. And then now he mentioned the nafs is like a muscle, right? So now we have to see. We have to look into ourselves, do a little bit of introspection, look and see what are our internal triggers. What are some of the things that cause us that pareshani? What causes us that grief or that worry or that makes us anxious? Our mood, our thoughts. What is changing us? What is causing us to feel uncomfortable, right? From within our moods, or for example, if we want to change, right? What is triggering us not to change by not feeling like I want to change? Or your thoughts, oh, I can't do it today. What are some external triggers, such as my environment? I want to go on a diet, but you open your closet at home and all of a sudden it's full of like chocolates and cookies and all this stuff is there. So how are you going to be able to? How are you going to change when you filled your entire environment, surrounded yourself with those things that's going to take you back and not allow you to change? Just like friends, external factors, right? Like some friends, and we'll get into it. But for example, sometimes you say that, you know, a lot of times our parents, our elders, our friends, our good friends, they tell us, you know what? I don't think you hanging out with this group of people is the best thing for you. I don't think maybe you should be hanging out with these people. I say, no, I know. You know, No, but then you're like, these people are criminals. They're not doing good things. You shouldn't. They're smoking. They're doing drugs. They're doing all sorts of weird things you probably shouldn't be doing. No, that's fine. I won't get affected by them. You know, I that doesn't affect me. That doesn't bother me, right? That doesn't bother. The mashayikh mentioned that if you want to see what type of a person someone is, see who their friends are. Why? Because you will become like them. So when you want to change your akhlaq, you want to wake up for Fajr, you want to go to the masjid. There was one of our mashayikh, he mentioned he was walking to Fajr Salat one morning. Walking to Fajr. It's still dark outside when you're walking to Fajr in the masjid. He said a car pulls up and it's all of my old friends from college. And there was some of my Muslim friends. And they're like, let's go, we're going to a party right now. He said, 5 o'clock in the morning? What kind of party is at 5 o'clock in the morning? And he's on the way to Fajr. And he had made this azm that I'm not going to be like that guy anymore. I'm not going to be like my old self. I've changed. So his mujahada, his challenge was not to hang out with those friends again. But sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings imtihan, brings tests in different shapes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. So Allah can bring tests in different ways. So the point being is, he got tested in his friends, in his environment, in the people he kept around him. So for example here, how does your environment create problems for you in order for you to change? To do something that you have made an intention to change yourself. Too much junk food at home, or friends that engage in those certain behaviors, right? So what do? Right? There's a study that was done. So a lot of times what we focus on our internal triggers, such as, I want to stop doing this certain action, or I want to stop making ghiba, or I want to change this behavior. I'm not a good person. I have to make tawbah. I have to read more Quran. You're focusing on your internal triggers, right? But external triggers also affect you, such as your environment. This is something that you can change. For example, there was a study that was done, right? And I'll give you this example. There was a study done in Chicago where a group of people, they were given a box, like a big tub of popcorn. At the theaters. And it was stale, old. You have no, inclination to eat this popcorn. But one group of people was given a big tub that you can't even finish it, but they were given a big tub. Another group of people were given an even bigger tub of popcorn. The same popcorn. So if you have the bigger one or the smaller one, it doesn't matter, it's the same popcorn. You have no, more intention to eat that one. But what was interesting, and what the study found was that the people who were given the bigger tub ate 3 times more than the people given the smaller tub of popcorn. So what does that mean? Right? That if you change those factors, if you change your external factors, your external environment, that will have an effect on you. That will have an effect on yourself, on your personality, on those things that you intend to change. So for example, the example that was given previously, or that's on this slide, is that if you want to change your diet, Ramadan is coming up. A lot of times we make this intention that in Ramadan what we're going to do is we're going to eat better. We're going to eat fruit, we're going to have yogurt, we're going to drink water. No soda, no juice, no fried foods. If Maulana Hashim was here, we'd all be afraid to say fried foods. Nobody would even mention pakoras or anything. So this is everything is just sitting right there. Diet. You're not going to be able to change anything. You're fooling yourself. But what you do is you start to clean out your closet. You start to clean out your cupboard. You start to change the items in your fridge. This will allow you, it will force you to change your habits. This will be and it doesn't feel good, but this is the whole point. Sometimes it doesn't feel good. Our Shaykh al-Mashayikh, Hazrat Maulana Shah Hakim Muhammad Akhtar Sahab, rahmatullahi alayhi, he once mentioned, and he told my teacher Maulana Tamim Sahab this. He said that, Maulwi Sahab, sometimes not feeling good is good for you. He says not feeling good all the time is actually good for you. So Maulana Tamim Sahab, Hafidahullah, he's like from America, like me and everybody else or whoever, was raised here. And he's thinking, what? That doesn't even make sense. Not feeling good is good. How is that? Exactly. Just the same topic that we are discussing right now. And that is going through a little bit of discomfort will give you long-term, right, satisfaction. Because you need a little bit of discomfort to change in order to become a better person. You need a little discomfort in the beginning in order to change oneself. And before we go to the next slide, there's just one more example I want to give, and I know we want to make sure we get through all this. There was a video that became popular in the past couple of weeks of this Jewish rabbi. And he was talking about change, the same idea of change. And he said that one day he was sitting in a dentist's office, and he was waiting for his appointment. And he said, I had nothing to do, and there was this magazine on the counter. It was like a National Geographic magazine, and it had like this shellfish sort of creature on there. He said, I don't even care about shellfish, I don't even like seafood. But he said, I was bored, I had nothing else to do, so I opened up this magazine, I started reading it. He said, and then I took ibra. He took a lesson from this, and he said it was very interesting. He said these soft shell crabs, they have to constantly change their shell. You know, they grow out of their shell, or they find a shell. You know, they have a shell, they find seashells. They crawl inside of it, and they live their life. Over the course of a few months, they get bigger. So what they do is, they hide behind a big rock, they take off that shell, they look for another seashell that's bigger, then they crawl inside of that, and then they wear that seashell for another few months, and they continue living their life. And then when they get bigger, they hide behind a rock, take off that seashell, look for another one that's bigger, wear that one, and then continue living their life. This is the life of a little crab or whatever it is. So he said, but the interesting thing was not that. The interesting thing was that he said if that crab had a doctor, the doctor would prescribe medication and he would never feel the need to change his shell. The point being is the agitation that that crab felt was the motivation for him to change and to grow. The crab cannot grow unless he's put through a little bit of agitation, a little bit of discomfort. When we are put in a little bit of discomfort is when we grow. When this ayat of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. That sometimes we feel like the world is coming to an end. I have no way out. I'm stuck financially, with my family, at work. I have no way out. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. I don't know how. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, anyone who fears Allah, who is conscious of Allah, anyone who in every amal of his, every day-to-day action of his, he's conscious, my Allah is watching me. My Allah is watching me. How should I behave here? What does Allah promise you? Allah promises you a way out. And there was a friend of mine who was looking how I can get married. So our ustad, he said to him, fear Allah and be conscious of Allah wherever you are. Wherever you go, if you're at work, on the street, at the restaurant, wherever you go, always think like this, that how should I act if my Allah is watching me? So I said, okay, I did that. From out of nowhere, a sister came to him and told him, I want to marry you. I want to learn about Islam. One thing led to another. He eventually ended up getting married. So the point being is, there's a little bit of discomfort we go through in the beginning with long-term satisfaction.
So I'll go through this.
Go ahead.
So this number 4 that we have up here is basically, I kind of talked about this. أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. That the most beloved actions to Allah are those that are done, even if they're small, but consistently. And I mentioned that, the nafs is like a muscle. With the uncle, right? I talked about how you develop the muscle. Now, you want to be careful of overexertion, right? In Ramadan, what we'll do is we'll put ourselves through lots of mujahadat, which is great, mashallah. One should do that in Ramadan. But you also want to be careful that you're not jumping into something that's not sustainable. This is why you take a self-assessment. You say, am I going to be able to be like this throughout the whole year? If the answer is no, then do an assessment and be realistic with yourself. Because the nafs actually gets overexerted, and then it doesn't have the ability to actually do more. Impulse control is like a muscle, and it gets strained. So I'll give you an example. There's a study between that people had done, where they put radishes, right, on one table, and chocolate chip cookies on another table. And they brought two groups of people in. One group, they told them, go ahead and eat the chocolate chip cookies, go crazy. And of course, they ate the chocolate chip cookies, they didn't touch the radishes. The second group, they told them, you can only eat the radishes, you cannot eat the chocolate chip cookies. And the chocolate chip cookies smell very nice, it's just freshly baked. So what did they have to go through? The second group, they have to have some impulse control, some discipline, right? You have a desire to want to eat the cookies, but you control yourself. It's not too difficult, but the idea is that you have to strain yourself a little bit. Then what they did was they gave both of these guys, afterwards, a problem-solving activity. They have to solve this problem, but actually there's no solution to the problem. It's a trick question. So both the group that actually ate the chocolate chip cookies, they ended up spending 19 minutes trying to solve the problem. And then they gave up. The group that ate the radishes spent 9 minutes. They gave up after 9 minutes. What's the moral? The people that ate the radishes, they had to control themselves from eating the cookies. So they were already tired. They were already straining their impulse control. Now when they went to do a problem, to solve a problem, they had to again use their control themselves from wanting to give up. So they had to use that, they got tired, so they actually ended up spending less time. Point that I'm trying to make is that don't overexert yourself. To create such a situation for yourself where you put so much on your plate that you're not actually going to be able to sustain it. And I actually talked about this. We'll run through some of these. Building the muscle. We talked about with the uncle, building the muscle. Yes, go ahead. Faddal. Yeah, so he's saying, what about having a cheat day on something, right? The cheat day is not as useful as having some continuous habit that you're forming. So having a decrease in reduction, like reducing slowly, right? So you're not going to all of a sudden cut out all sweets all at once, or things that maybe are not good for you. So you're going to have it's called the harm reduction principle. So you reduce it a little, then reduce it a little, reduce it a little. What you're doing is you're actually training your nafs not to want that anymore. The cheat day is really a cheat day because you maintain the desire for that thing. See, the thing is, the impulse, you have the capacity to alter your desires. Like people cannot enjoy fruit. Why? And Sheikh Hashim was here, he loves fruit, mashallah, but he doesn't really like, so why? Because we eat so much of the sweets. When you eat a gulab jamun and then eat like a strawberry after that, or cherry or something, and you're like, oh, this is so sour, right? Why? Because like this concentrated sugar burst that is exploding your brain, that is basically inducing like a drug reaction in your brain in the reward circuitry, basically, is not good for you, right? So then what happens? Actually, you have a craving response. There's this process of habituation, tolerance. So your body requires a certain intake of a certain amount of sugar. But if you reduce that, you begin to decrease the necessity for that. And actually what you do is, there's a principle to change something. And that's to change something, you put a positive opposite. This actually exists, this is a psychological principle. Actually, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, rahimahullah ta'ala, also wrote about this in the 9th century. Talks about changing a behavior by putting something more positive in place of it. So what are you going to eat? The intensity is obviously going to be less, but it's a process of some mujahada. So you're going to eat dates, honey, strawberries, and that sort of thing. But don't give yourself a cheat day, because you don't habituate yourself out of that habit. You understand? So the idea is that you want to decrease it to a certain point, that you actually work towards maintaining what you feel is actually realistic and healthy, right? So maybe you say, you know, I have only a small amount of intake that I do of this particular item. The second thing to do is actually why don't you talk about it? Let's go briefly, because we have time. This is muhasaba, documenting your change.
So like Brother Human was mentioning, harm reduction, right? Not allowing yourself to take the whole amount. You cut it short, you cut it less, and you work on reducing the frequency. And then you document it. You're recording a log. And in our Islamic tradition, we call this muhasaba, taking an account, right? You want to make sure that you take an account so that you have a record of it. That you are not allowing yourself to just indulge into whatever it is. You decrease that amount.
And document it. So what you want to do is you want to document this, right? So okay, when you're trying to budget for something, okay, how many, is there any business, actually Jabir is a businessman. I'm not going to put you guys on the spot. Jabir is a businessman, right? Do you guys have any accounting and hisab of your business?
Of course.
Clothing line? So if you don't have any accounting, what are you going to do? You're just going to spend here. You don't know how much revenue is coming in. You don't know how much is going out and coming. You don't know if you're in the green, you're in the red. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot, basically, right? If you don't budget, you're not going to be able to. So what we do is we actually document all of these things, right? And when we go to work, we create these evaluations and we count the amount of money that's coming into the house, our expenses, our salary. But how many of us actually do muhasabah of our own a'mal, of our own deeds? Your greatest investment is yourself. Your greatest investment is yourself. And mashayikh do this, right? They basically have a mu'amalat, like they document, they say, okay, this is how much. And muhasabah is about actually tracking. And you know what? We have all of these gadgets to help us with this. Now, okay, I have this much qada, salah, this much siyam I have to do, check it off. This is my a'mal of the day. I want to do this much Quran daily. And count it. And actually you can make a pattern and see I'm slowly starting to increase. Right? Business is going good. I'm making more revenue. That's great. Yeah, your projected growth is phenomenal. So, حَاسِبُوا أَنْ قَبْلَ أَن تُحَاسَبُوا وَزِنُوا قَبْلَ أَن تُوزَنُوا. Take account of yourself before actually account is taken of you. I want to actually expand on this, replacing this behavior. Come back to that for a minute. So you want to change a behavior, right? And you want to put something that's positive in place of it. For example, the time that you are going to feel, do it when you're most vulnerable. The time that you are most triggered to want to eat sweets. Let's say, for example, you have a bad habit of eating ice cream at nighttime, or eating sweets before you go to bed, or you do it in the morning, or some portion of the day. Pick that time to go exercise. That time that you would usually eat sweets, you're going to exercise. Why? Because can you exercise and eat sweets at the same? I guess you could, technically, right? You're eating cheesecake while you're at the gym, right? But that usually doesn't really happen, right? So pick the time that you would be most vulnerable, you're less likely to actually do it. You're replacing that time you would usually be vulnerable to do that behavior with something that actually works in the exact opposite direction. And also maintain, this is important, psychologically, you have to be prepared for the fact that your motivation is going to go away. Okay? Your motivation is going to go away. In Ramadan, you're going to be very motivated. For example, I used to work in a gym. After New Year's Eve, what would happen? The gym would be packed. Everybody would be in the gym. The serious guys, they would lay low for a while. 2 to 3 weeks, they just shorten their routine. Why? Because all the machines are taken up, there's lines and everything. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, nobody's in the gym anymore. Everyone has New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose 15 pounds, 20 pounds. Or prior to nikah, for example, they lose 15 pounds, they get married, they're like 30 pounds overweight now. You know? Why? Because there's this motivation, the motivation goes away. The motivation is, I want to attract my wife, I want her to like me and all of that. Now I got her, there's no more motivation. Right? It went away. So the motivation is going to go away. So what you want to do is you don't want to do the behavior in the pursuit of your motivation, not based upon the hal that you're in right now. Do not be a servant of your condition. I feel like doing this. I feel like volunteering in the masjid. So I do it for a week, 2 weeks, and then I'm gone. I don't feel like doing it anymore. It's too much hard work. You have to anticipate in advance this is going to be hard work. So what you do is you create a system where you're going to continue to do this. This is actually what we call the trigger or your cognitive barriers that are going to work against you. The final thing I'm saying, the second to the last thing, is that you should get supervision and support. Imam al-Ghazali, he says that an individual, if they want to make any lasting change, the only way to do so is to actually take a rafiqan salihan, aliman bihadha al-amr, يجعله شيخه ليلاحظ أحواله وينبهه بعيوب نفسه. That a person will take a close friend or a sheikh or a peer, get support. In New Jersey, Salim told me, Salim Patel, he's like, they have like a Fajr club. MashaAllah, that's awesome. Get support. Somebody who's going to work with you. Get a workout buddy. But don't quit when they quit. You have to motivate each other. Right? One person quits and they're like, it's contagious. It's easy to go in the negative direction. It's hard to build something. Right? It's harder to lose weight. It's very easy to gain weight, isn't it? And get these things. There's somebody told me they have a trouble with Fajr. So there's this actual thing that I saw. It's called, what is it? Clocky. You should find it on Amazon. It is awesome. What you do, what it does, you set the alarm, right? You put the alarm on, let's say 5 o'clock. You want to wake up for Fajr. And what do you usually do with this phone? Come on, let's be honest. So we've done this once in our lives at least. Maybe we wake up right before Fajr, or like we woke up after it. Click, turn it off. Or what you do is you set this so that you can satisfy your conscience that you actually are intending on waking up. And then you're like, MashaAllah, Naum is from Allah, this is barakah. Allah just gave me sleep, what can I do? I didn't even realize I'm just turning. Why? Because you've become so habituated to turning it off. So what do? Take Clocky. Clocky, you put the alarm on 5 o'clock. What it does is at 5 o'clock, it turns on, it jumps off of the counter, off of your table, and it starts circling around the room. So if you want to turn it off, you actually have to get out of bed and chase it. By the time you chase it and get hold of it, you want to strangle it by this point, right? You're awake. There's no way you're going back. This is like shaitan has really got a hold of you by now. If you are totally awake and you're so irritated that you actually go back to sleep, you're like, I might as well pray now. I mean, we can't even sleep. I've been chasing this thing around the room for the last 5 minutes. And the final thing is, and we'll open it up for discussion Q&A, is a consistent reassessment. Is that when your behavior changes, you have to go back and continue to do a reassessment of yourself. Go back and reevaluate yourself. Reevaluate yourself. And many people say, there's a sister that used to come and she asked me for some advice and counseling. She goes, I feel depressed sometimes and I don't have any energy, so I don't pray. And she said, this is a problem. Why don't I have energy? Why don't I feel like praying? I said, the problem isn't that you don't feel like praying. The problem is you didn't pray. You understand? The feeling is natural. Everybody doesn't feel like praying sometimes. Right? But actually, my sheikh used to say that prayer in a state when you actually don't feel like praying, and you pray it even in that instance, you're going against your nafs, can be more rewarding than the prayer that you wanted to pray. Why? Because you actually did it for the sake of Allah. So the idea is that dysfunction in psychology is determined by objective criterion, objective measures. Your behavior. I don't feel like doing something. That's natural. If I don't do it, that's the problem. That's dysfunctional. You understand? Everybody feels depressed sometimes. The moment they start to give way to that feeling, and they don't get up and do something about it to break that cycle, you create more of it. This idea, lethargy begets lethargy. Depression begets depression. Negativity creates more negativity. You ever realize that you actually go and you wake up early, you go to the gym, you complete an assignment, you go to work, you come back, and what do you want to do? You want to do more things, right? You feel accomplished. Where'd you get the energy from? Because positivity creates more positivity. This is the case even in relationships, right? With your family members, with your spouse. When somebody puts in negativity, more negativity comes in. The more, whatever you put in is what you get out. So the idea is, but to actually go back and to try for the month of Ramadan, that I'm going to take it upon myself to try to make tangible goals. Document it. This Ramadan, my goal is to increase Quran, increase Salat with Jamaat, decrease my appetite, and after Ramadan, here's what I'm going to maintain. This is the goal. And work actively on it. And that's kind of the way that you can go about controlling and dealing with your nafs. And we'll stop here. Is there any final remarks you want to make?
Just right before so on this slide here, mashallah, the different sort of suggestions that were made for getting supervision, getting support, having a Fajr Salat team. This is very beautiful. There was one of the mashayikh, he was visiting our area, and he said a lot of people, the biggest challenges they have for religious people is waking up for Fajr. Now this is just one example, but look how much he was making fikr and thinking about this. He was saying that people can go to the gym and bench press 150 pounds, 100 pounds, and really show their strength. That's probably not a lot of weight anyways, but I mean for me, that's a lot. I can barely pick up the bar. But when a person is bench pressing, he's showing himself his strength. But when it comes to Fajr Salat, we're unable to pick up like a 4-ounce blanket off of ourselves. Right? So what he did was, he said, there was a person who asked him, Shaykh, how do I wake up for Fajr? He said, well, do you set your alarm clock? He goes, yeah, I do, but I wake up. He goes, buy 2 phones and put one on one side of the room and one on the other. And this clocky, I've seen this. Actually, one of my friends has one, but it's an interesting, different version. It's a Rubik's Cube. Imagine trying to solve this Rubik's Cube at Fajr time, and this thing is loud, it's shooting sounds. Actually, most smartphones now have an alarm that makes you solve math problems before it will stop, right? The other thing I just wanted to mention, though, these are beautiful examples Brother Human mentioned, but having a team, an expert, a mentor, sometimes having someone that you can speak to about this and taking their mashwara and being able to address this to them, such as a sheikh, like he mentioned, Imam Ghazali mentions, having a rafiqun salih, a good friend who can advise you and how he can guide you. This is also very important. And a lot of times we tend to shy away from expressing some of the things that our challenges that we're going through, thinking that, I'm the only one who understands my situation. Nobody else knows what I'm going through. It's very difficult, but this is only my challenge, my problem. You can speak to your mashayikh. There are people in the community who you can reach out to, speak to the imams, speak to your counselors, people like Brother Human in this area, therapists. People like this exist who you can actually go to and communicate this to. I'm having these challenges. What is a game plan, a strategy for me to overcome this challenge? And our mashayikh and our Islamic tradition, this is what we had. When the person had a challenge, when a person had an issue that they were struggling with, what they would do is they would go to the mashayikh. They would go to the scholars, and then they would ask them these questions. So I just wanted to mention this as well, because we're in a masjid setting, and it's appropriate that we mention how we could practically help resolve some of these challenges that we are going through. Ramadan is coming. We have all sorts of different challenges we're facing in Ramadan. So who can I speak to about them? Sometimes we feel quite alone. Or the sisters, they may not have someone to speak to. So just remember this, and inshallah, finding a religious person in the community, an imam or a counselor or someone trustworthy, to communicate these issues with will help tremendously. Because a lot of times it's just a matter of communication. It's just telling someone. And then when you hear, Brother Kamran was giving some, or one of our good friends was giving a good piece of advice, is whenever you go into a meeting, go with two people. Just because you hear different feedback with that person. Don't go just by yourself. Because when you leave that meeting, you'll have one set of thinking of how this meeting went. But when you go with two people, then what happens, then you can make mashwara. You can go back and forth and exchange ideas. So I just wanted to share this additional bit of advice. Jazakumullah khair.
What we'll do is, I think at this point, shall we give just a time for people to prepare for Maghrib? Do you think that would be best? And then do some Q&A afterwards? Or what's your suggestion? Sorry, let's see. What is your mashura? Sorry? Yeah? Okay. Sure, one question and then we'll have questions after. Inshallah, go ahead. Correct.
Have some habits. Who do that? At the age of 5 or 6, child, you start learning who do that. When stage comes with fall and puberty, it becomes mechanical. So after that, you realize, knowing your atmosphere, surrounding, oh, something to have, that is not good for you from the point of view. That time discipline is good. Does physical age matters with the mental age? And how difficult it is and how easy it is to change and develop good habits?
With regard to age, right? Is that what you're talking about? So the older you get, is it more difficult to actually develop habits? This is true, but it's not impossible. And the reason why is because it's more difficult to change is because when you carry on a habit for a long time, the longer the habit remains, the more difficult it becomes to actually change it. So the issue is that you've sort of created a long-term habituation of this behavior. But it's not impossible to change. Absolutely not. It requires, of course it's possible. And it's kind of like, there's people, working with younger couples is a lot easier than working with older couples. Why? Because the older couples come to me and they say,